Marion Davies was a charismatic comedian who lit up the screen with her lively performances and undeniable charm. Her films were simple, fun, and full of heart, yet today, her legacy often goes unnoticed. Many mistakenly believe her stardom was entirely orchestrated by William Randolph Hearst, the powerful newspaper tycoon. Critics have dismissed her as a talentless actress whose career was propped up solely by Hearst's relentless publicity machine. While it's true that Hearst played a significant role in shaping her career and ensuring glowing press coverage, it was Marion's natural talent, wit, and warmth that truly won over audiences. So why is her talent so often overlooked? Much of the blame lies with the shadow cast by Citizen Kane. The film's thinly veiled portrayal of Hearst, and by extension Marion, left an indelible mark on her reputation. Ironically, this was one part of her life that even Hearst's influence couldn't control. Now, let's explore the story of Marion Davies together. Born Marion Doris in Brooklyn on January 3, 1897, she came from an Irish-American family with strong ties to the theater world. Her brother-in-law, George W. Lederer, was a prominent producer, and Marion's striking beauty naturally drew her to the stage, following in the footsteps of her older sisters. The Doris family was affluent and ambitious, eager to climb the social ladder of New York's English-dominated high society. To help their daughters fit in, Marion's parents encouraged them to adopt the more English-sounding surname, Marion, inspired by a real estate ad. Marion's mother, Rose Riley, had noticed. Rose, also of Irish descent, came from a wealthy upper-class background. Her husband, Bernard J. Doris, had already changed the family's surname from the more traditionally Irish-sounding Doris. Bernard, a well-known magistrate, gained media attention during Prohibition for his sharp wit and eccentric rulings on bootlegging cases. His father, however, had endured a much harsher life as an impoverished weaver who fled Ulster during the Irish famine of the 1840s. Bernard was the sole survivor of his family, a testament to the resilience that seemed to run in Marion's blood. Marion's rise to fame may have been bolstered by Hearst's influence, but her enduring appeal came from her own charm and undeniable humor. Her story, like so many in Hollywood, is a mix of glitz, grit, and the occasional scandal, a true reflection of the golden age of cinema. Life in America brought Marion Davies immense opportunities and a far more prosperous existence, but it wasn't without its share of heartbreak and danger. In 1900, when Marion was just 3 years old, her 15-year-old brother Charles tragically drowned in Lake Saratoga. At the time, the Doris family lived near Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Marion received her early education at a Sacred Heart convent near the Hudson River, and later attended another convent in Tours, France. However, school was far from a happy experience for her. She struggled with her studies and felt deeply unhappy under the strict supervision of Catholic nuns. Adding to the complexity of her upbringing, the family had close ties to architect Stanford White, and the infamous Evelyn Nesbit scandal became a common topic of discussion in their home. Marion had striking looks and supportive parents who encouraged her to pursue her dream of performing. But her school years were a nightmare. She suffered relentless bullying from her classmates because of her stutter, and the nuns were no kinder. They punished her harshly every time she stumbled over her words. Eventually, her mother decided to pull her out of school early to shield her from the abuse. Marion's career began in 1914 when she joined the chorus line of the musical Chin Chin at the Old Forest Theater in Philadelphia, which starred David C. Montgomery and Fred Stone. She made her Broadway debut in the same production at the Globe Theater on October 20. Over the next few years, she appeared in other shows like Nobody Home, Misinformation, and Stop, Look and Listen. Beyond performing, she also worked as a model for renowned illustrators Harrison Fisher and Howard Chandler Christie. By 1916, Marion had earned a spot as a featured performer in the Ziegfeld Follies. However, her time there was limited due to her stammer, which made delivering lines on stage a challenge. Instead, she was assigned dancing roles. During her stint with the Ziegfeld Follies, Marion faced another harsh reality: frequent harassment from audience members. She particularly disliked the so-called stage door Johnnies, especially the rowdy college boys from Yale. On one occasion, while performing in a show starring Gabby Deslys, a group of unruly Yale students expressed their displeasure by pelting Marion and her fellow dancers with tomatoes and rotten eggs. While it was an improvement from her school days, it was far from the glamorous life she had envisioned. Everything changed when Marion met William Randolph Hearst, a man who would alter the course of her life forever. The story of how they first met has been shrouded in myth. One popular tale claims that Hearst became smitten after seeing her dance in a musical, attending the show every night for 8 weeks, and sitting in the same seat each time. While it sounds like something out of an old Hollywood script, Marion later dismissed this version entirely. After Hearst's death, she clarified that they met in 1918, after she had already appeared in her first film. Their introduction, she said, was far more ordinary. She accidentally bumped into him, addressed him as Sir, and they struck up a friendship from there. It was no secret to her that Hearst's intentions leaned more toward infatuation than simple friendship. Around this time, she was hired by a Broadway studio for a photo shoot where she posed as both a Japanese geisha and a virginal bride. To her surprise, she noticed Hearst lurking in the background during the session. Feeling uneasy, she left the set abruptly and locked herself in her dressing room. Later, she discovered that Hearst had orchestrated the entire shoot just to watch her. Embarrassed when she caught on, he quietly left the studio without saying a word. When Marion first got to know Hearst, whom she fondly nicknamed W, he was already a powerhouse in the movie industry. He owned International Newsreel and was backing early serials like The Mysteries of Myra and Exploits of Elaine. However, Marion's journey into film had nothing to do with Hearst at the start. At just 20 years old, she wrote her own movie, Runaway Romany, and got her brother-in-law, George Lederer, to direct it. The film, shot in Florida and released by Pathé, told the story of a gypsy girl who discovers she's the daughter of a wealthy man. Unfortunately, the movie didn't fare well, but her willingness to dive into the uncharted waters of early cinema was undeniably bold. Despite the film's failure, it caught the attention of one very important viewer: William Randolph Hearst. While critics and studio executives mostly ignored Runaway Romany, Hearst saw untapped potential in Marion, potential he was willing to nurture at tremendous personal expense. To support her career, he founded Cosmopolitan Pictures, a production company created with the sole purpose of turning Marion into a star. She agreed to a $500 a week contract, a lavish New York townhouse for her family, and became the focus of an extravagant promotional campaign through Hearst's media empire. It was during this time that their relationship became romantic. Soon, the married Hearst and his glamorous new companion were the talk of the town, hosting extravagant parties that became legendary. For their first project, Hearst developed an opera-style movie called Beatrice Fairfax, which ran throughout 1918. Marion played a wealthy young woman embarking on thrilling adventures. The goal was to steadily build her public image, but the serial failed to impress audiences. Undeterred, Hearst pivoted to a new strategy. Instead of building her career gradually, he decided to introduce Marion to the public as an already established star. In 1918, she starred in 2 more Hearst-backed films, Cecilia of the Pink Roses and Burden of Proof. Cecilia of the Pink Roses became a template for many of her future roles, following a Cinderella-style story that Hearst seemed to favor. In the film, Marion played a spirited young woman from a poor background who helps her bricklayer father while managing their home. Her life takes a dramatic turn when her father invents a device that makes them wealthy, allowing her to attend finishing school. There, she transforms into a polished, radiant young woman, dazzling audiences with her charm and elegant gowns. While these films didn't make Marion an instant icon, they laid the foundation for her career and showcased Hearst's relentless dedication to turning her into Hollywood royalty. In 1919, Marion Davies appeared in 4 films: The Belle of New York, Getting Mary Married, The Dark Star, and The Cinema Murder. These projects, while varied, didn't help her develop a distinct on-screen identity. Most of these films were fairly ordinary, and she was often cast in elaborate costume dramas, roles that didn't yet highlight her knack for comedy. However, Hearst spared no expense in surrounding her with top-tier talent. For instance, Getting Mary Married was penned by the acclaimed duo Anita Loos and John Emerson, while both it and The Dark Star were directed by Alan Dwan. For The Cinema Murder, Hearst went a step further, hiring Frances Marion, one of Hollywood's most successful screenwriters, known for her collaborations with Mary Pickford. Marion was paid an impressive $5,000 a week to craft 7 scripts specifically for Marion. In this film, Marion portrayed an aspiring actress who falls for a playwright falsely accused of murder. Despite 3 years and 7 films by 1920, Marion's career had yet to truly take off. That same year she starred in April Folly, a light-hearted story involving a diamond heist and a masquerade ball, and The Restless Sex, a tangled drama about a young woman falling in love with her adopted brother. In 1921, she appeared in Buried Treasure and Enchantment. While the Times remained skeptical of her potential, other publications began to notice improvements in her performances. Even Variety, a Hearst independent outlet, praised her work in Enchantment, noting that her comedic timing and portrayal of a carefree, spoiled flapper were standout elements of the film. Interestingly, Marion was one of the first actresses in the 1920s to play a flapper on screen, a role she mastered in Enchantment, nearly 2 years before Colleen Moore's iconic turn in Flaming Youth. If Hearst had allowed her to continue in such roles, she might have become the definitive flapper of the era. By the end of 1921, her career was gaining momentum, but she was still searching for her niche. In 1922, a new trend emerged in Hollywood. Actresses taking on dual roles, such as playing both male and female characters or contrasting personalities like a plain sister and a beautiful one. These roles allowed actresses to showcase their versatility, experiment with costumes, and explore a wider range of characters. Marion, with her talent for mimicry and comedy, thrived in such roles, particularly when playing male characters. However, Hearst wasn't thrilled about seeing her dressed as bellboys or street urchins. That year, Marion appeared in 4 films that embraced the dual-role trend: The Bride's Play, Beauty's Worth, The Young Diana, and When Knighthood Was in Flower. In The Bride's Play, she portrayed both a modern 1920s woman and Enid of Cashel, a medieval Irish heroine. The film featured stunning location shoots at Point Lobos on California's Monterey Peninsula, not far from Hearst's San Simeon estate, which he had begun building in 1919. The film Beauty's Worth followed a rather over-the-top transformation story. It centered on a plain Quaker girl who, after crossing paths with a free-spirited bohemian artist on a beach, transforms into a glamorous socialite. The movie was shot on location at the breathtaking Point Lobos on the Monterey Peninsula. One of its standout moments was a visually stunning tableau vivant, where Marion Davies recreated her iconic dancing doll routine from the 1916 Ziegfeld Follies. In The Young Diana, Marion played an unattractive spinster who undergoes a dramatic transformation into a stunning young woman after being subjected to some questionable experiments by a scientist. However, the twist? It was all just a dream. By 1922, critics were increasingly vocal about the lavish spending on Marion films. According to the New York Times, she was given more extravagant settings, luxurious costumes, and meticulous direction than nearly any other actor of the time. The paper also raised eyebrows at the overly flattering title cards that described her beauty as pure gold and compared her to a diamond among rhinestones. It was clear that William Randolph Hearst was determined to cement Marion's image as a symbol of beauty, wealth, and sophistication. The grandeur of these productions was largely thanks to Joseph Urban, a renowned Viennese set designer who had previously worked on the Ziegfeld Follies and the Metropolitan Opera. Urban believed cinema was the ultimate modern art form, and Hearst gave him an unlimited budget to bring his vision to life. While Beauty's Worth had already drawn attention for its high costs, it paled in comparison to the scale of When Knighthood Was in Flower. Hearst hired Urban to create elaborate sets, including entire streets, villages, and a meticulously detailed Tudor court. The film's production cost a staggering $5.5 million, equivalent to nearly $100 million today, making it one of the most ambitious cinematic undertakings of its time. The movie, which remains available today, tells a romantic story about the right of young love to prevail. Marion played a fictionalized version of Mary Tudor, who initially defies an arranged marriage to King Louis XIII of France in order to protect her true love, Charles Brandon, portrayed by her frequent co-star, Forrest Stanley. Some of the exterior scenes were even filmed at Windsor Castle. Notably, the film also marked William Powell's second-ever screen appearance, where he portrayed King Francis. The premiere of When Knighthood Was in Flower was nothing short of spectacular. Held at New York City's Criterion Theater, the invitation-only event featured a dazzling display that prominently showcased Marion Davies as the star. According to Variety, Hearst organized what was then the most elaborate promotional campaign in theatrical history. This included over 650 billboards across New York, 300 subway ads, souvenir book booths in department stores, and an awe-inspiring collection of electric signs lighting up Times Square. The film managed to capture the spirit of the early 1920s and remains an interesting watch for that reason. Interestingly, it also serves as an early example of Hollywood's ongoing controversy over cultural appropriation. When it premiered in London, British audiences rejected it outright, even booing it off the screen. Critics were outraged at the idea of an American actress portraying a British woman. However, Edward, Prince of Wales, later Edward VIII, reportedly praised it as a wonderful picture. The uproar over ethnic representation didn't seem to bother him, perhaps unsurprising, considering his future choice of spouse. Despite its sentimental and somewhat outdated storyline, the film was well received at the time and marked the beginning of Marion Davies' rise to stardom. In fact, she was crowned the top female box office star of 1922, with Rudolph Valentino taking the title for male stars. By 1923, Marion had earned even more acclaim, particularly for her role in Adam and Eva. Critics applauded her ability to bring a breezy charm and stylish flair to comedic roles. One of her standout films that year was Little Old New York. The movie's sets were painstakingly crafted to evoke a nostalgic, wholesome vision of early New York, a far cry from the bustling, chaotic city we know today. The costumes and decor were especially noteworthy, with a highlight being the detailed recreation of Robert Fulton's revolutionary steamboat. Once again, Marion took on dual roles, playing Patricia O'Day, a young girl who disguises herself as her deceased brother, Patrick, to secure their inheritance. While some critics noted that her feminine features made it hard to believe she could pass as a boy, the film cleverly acknowledged this in a humorous scene where a woman, puzzled by Pat's refusal to kiss her hand, exclaims, "What an impossible little boy!" a playful nod to the obvious. Marion comedic flair shone in several memorable moments. In one scene, she humorously falls ill after attempting to smoke a pipe in the men's smoking room. In another, she disrupts a bare-knuckle brawl by ringing a fire bell, only to be captured by the furious crowd and tied to a post. Facing the threat of a flogging, she finally confesses she's not actually a boy. This film also marked her first collaboration with Harrison Ford, not the Indiana Jones star, of course, but an earlier actor with the same name. Marion films were often accompanied by lavish marketing campaigns. For instance, in August 1920, a full-page ad in Motion Picture Magazine featured a striking photo of her wearing a luxurious fur collar, her hair adorned with fresh roses. The ad bore all the hallmarks of William Randolph Hearst's meticulous influence. While the promotional blitz was undoubtedly savvy business, it also reflected the growing intensity of their personal relationship. By this point, Hearst, long estranged from his wife, Millicent Wilson, was seeking a divorce, though Millicent staunchly refused to grant it. For decades, whispers have swirled about the possibility that Marion Davies and William Randolph Hearst had a secret child between 1919 and 1923. Many believe that this child may have been Patricia Lake, born Patricia Van Cleve, who publicly presented herself as Marion's niece. However, the details surrounding her birth remain hazy. While her Los Angeles Times obituary places her birth sometime between 1920 and 1923, the Social Security Death Index lists it as June 8, 1919, a date that has been widely disputed. Interestingly, even Lake herself reportedly never knew her exact birth date. The official narrative stated that Lake was the daughter of Mary and Rose Van Cleve and Rose's first husband, George Van Cleve. But members of the Lake family have since claimed that Patricia was actually born to Marion and Hearst, then given to Rose after Rose's own infant tragically passed away. Allegedly, the deceased child's birth certificate was altered to mask the truth. In 1924, after Rose and George Van Cleve separated, George reportedly kidnapped Patricia and disappeared. Hearst's private investigators tracked them down 5 years later, and Patricia was returned to Rose's care. However, a court decision eventually placed her back with George. During this time, the Lake family claims that Hearst financially supported Patricia, covering her education in New York and Boston. Patricia also spent significant time with both Hearst and Marion, frequently traveling with them to Europe and appearing in their home movies. She was a regular guest at Hearst's San Simeon estate, and many noted her striking resemblance to Hearst himself. Patricia remained tight-lipped about the rumors throughout her life, even after Hearst and Marion passed away. However, family members have alleged that Hearst privately told Patricia on her wedding day that he was her father. Her wedding, held at San Simeon in 1937, was an extravagant affair, with Hearst and Marion playing prominent roles. If Patricia was born in 1919, she would have been 17 at the time of her wedding. However, if the later birth dates are to be believed, she would have been as young as 13. Just hours before her death in 1993, Patricia reportedly confirmed to her family that Hearst and Marion were her biological parents, urging them to make the truth known. Even so, the full story remains shrouded in mystery. Back in the early 1920s, she was a regular fixture in fan magazines, a clear sign of her widespread popularity at the time. In the June 1920 issue of Motion Picture, she shared some practical wedding advice, saying that if she were planning a wedding on a tight budget, she'd find a way to afford a gown and veil no matter what. The comment was amusingly ironic given her immense wealth. While fan magazines avoided directly addressing her relationship with William Randolph Hearst, they had no problem spotlighting her extravagant lifestyle. And extravagant it was. By 1926, her social calendar was the stuff of legend. Photoplay detailed a week in her life that included hosting a party for Lady Ravensdale, attending Rudolph Valentino's funeral with Pola Negri, celebrating the birth of a Goldwyn baby, and throwing a wedding at her home. She even entertained President Calvin Coolidge, a man known for his reserved demeanor. Despite his reputation for being a bit dull, Marion playfully served him a tropical juice that was actually a potent fruit punch. Much to her amusement, the president ended up tipsy, proving even Silent Cal could let loose under the right circumstances. Marion homes were equally as lavish as her lifestyle. Her Santa Monica beach house, funded by Hearst, was a jaw-dropping 70-room mansion stretching 300 feet along the coast. The property featured a gold leaf ballroom, a massive dining room, a 60-foot drawing room, and a marble swimming pool over 100 feet long, complete with a marble bridge. It was a palace by the Pacific, surrounded by lush gardens. Then there was San Simeon, now a California state park, and one of the grandest estates in the country. This sprawling castle included everything from a refectory to Roman and Greek-style pools, a zoo, and countless opulent rooms. Marion and Hearst also spent time at Wintoon, their Northern California estate, which resembled a whimsical village straight out of a fairy tale, with cottages named after storybook characters like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. The couple's legendary parties were the cherry on top of their extravagant lifestyle. At San Simeon, the biggest stars of the 1920s and 1930s gathered for tennis matches, horseback riding, and glamorous costume balls. Marion's masquerade parties were particularly unforgettable, with guests dressing in elaborate costumes. Even Hearst got in on the fun, once dressing as President Madison, while others came as everything from circus clowns to pickpockets. These parties were snapshots of a bygone era, with Hollywood royalty living it up in a world of pure fantasy. In short, Marion Davies wasn't just a silent film star. She was the life of the party, the queen of excess, and a symbol of the roaring 20s glitz and glamour. While Marion Davies led a life that most could only dream of, it still wasn't enough to fully satisfy William Randolph Hearst. Even though he had won the love of his life, his wandering eye never seemed to settle. Hearst, despite being married the entire time, was notoriously jealous and possessive. Decades later, Leda Gray, Charlie Chaplin's second wife, shared a revealing story about Marion. According to Gray, Marion had confided in her about her feelings for Hearst, admitting that she would give everything to marry him, not for his wealth or security, as he had already provided more than she could ever need, nor for his charm, which often bored her, or even for his skills in the bedroom, which she dismissed as unimpressive. Instead, she valued how he made her feel, like she truly mattered to him. Their relationship, however, was far from a fairy tale. Both Marion and Hearst were unfaithful, engaging in numerous affairs. Marion was romantically linked to figures like Charlie Chaplin and Dick Powell, while Hearst had a very public affair with Maybelle Swore, a blonde chorus girl. This particular relationship infuriated Marion, especially since Hearst's newspapers heavily promoted Swore's career, much like they had once done for Marion. Over time, the strain of their tumultuous relationship drove Marion to increasingly rely on alcohol. At social gatherings, Hearst and Marion often kept to themselves, but Hearst enforced strict rules on their guests, only one cocktail per person, and no alcohol allowed in their rooms. These rules were largely aimed at curbing Marion's growing drinking problem, though they were frequently ignored. Despite Hearst's efforts, Marion continued to drink heavily. By 1924, Marion had cemented her place in Hollywood, earning the title of Queen of the Screen through a magazine poll, though considering it was published in a Hearst-owned paper, the results were likely skewed. Her film Janice Meredith, a Revolutionary War epic, took over 8 months to film and cost a fortune, as noted by the Times. The movie featured iconic moments like Paul Revere's ride and George Washington's crossing of the Delaware, with Marion donning 20 different costumes throughout the film. In one memorable sequence, she escapes through a window, rides to warn the troops, and even trudges through snow on foot to complete her mission. The imagery of her braving the elements remains one of the film's most striking elements. With hits like When Knighthood Was in Flower, Little Old New York, and Janice Meredith, Marion became a household name by 1925. Her films were known for their lavish production values, stunning costumes, and a unique blend of comedy and romance set against historical backdrops. Unlike her contemporaries, stars like Colleen Moore, Clara Bow, and the Talmadge sisters, Marion stood out as a comedic actress who brought authenticity and warmth to her roles. Yet, while her career soared, her personal life grew increasingly complicated and, at times, perilous. In November 1924, Marion Davies joined a group of partygoers aboard William Randolph Hearst's luxurious steam yacht, Oneida, for what was supposed to be a celebratory weekend. The occasion? The birthday of film producer Thomas Ince, and a chance to finalize a business deal between Hearst's Cosmopolitan Productions and Ince's studio. Hearst himself had invited Ince during a visit to the producer's Benedict Canyon estate, Diaz Dorado. However, the weekend took a dark turn. Reports claimed that Ince suffered from severe indigestion while on the yacht. Hearst's studio manager, Dr. Daniel Goodman, helped him disembark in San Diego, where he boarded a train bound for Los Angeles. Unfortunately, Ince's condition worsened en route, forcing the train to stop in Del Mar. There, Dr. T.A. Parker and a nurse, Jessie Howard, attended to him. Allegedly, Ince admitted to consuming a particularly strong cocktail on the yacht. He was eventually taken back to his Hollywood home, where he passed away. Ince's death quickly became the subject of wild speculation. Some rumors suggested Hearst had shot Ince in a fit of jealousy after catching him making advances toward Marion. Another version claimed that Hearst had intended to shoot Charlie Chaplin, who was rumored to be romantically involved with Marion, but accidentally hit Ince instead. Chaplin's valet reportedly claimed to have seen Ince being carried off the yacht with a head wound, fueling these theories. Screenwriter Eleanor Glynn, who was also present at the party, later remarked that guests were sworn to secrecy, a strange request if Ince had died of natural causes. Years later, Lita Gray, Chaplin's wife, echoed the story of a violent altercation aboard the yacht. Yet, despite the whispers and accusations, no solid evidence ever emerged to support these claims. San Diego's District Attorney Chester C. Kempley eventually declared that Ince's death was due to heart failure caused by acute indigestion. With 3 doctors and a nurse involved in his care, the official explanation seemed clear. Still, the rumors of foul play persisted, and, to this day, some corners of Hollywood remain convinced that jealousy and rage led to Ince's untimely death. Amid the scandal, Marion continued her career with the 1925 film Lights of Old Broadway, directed by Monta Bell. She showcased her signature talent for dual roles, playing twins separated at birth. One twin, Felyandi, grows up in a poor Irish family, while the other, Anne Dondo, is raised by an affluent Dutch family in New York. Marion's ability to bring both characters to life was a testament to her versatility. Another standout performance came in Beverly of Graustark, directed by Sidney Franklin and based on George Barr McCutcheon's beloved novel. In this light-hearted tale, Marion played Beverly, a spirited young woman who impersonates her cousin Oscar to secure his claim to the throne of Graustark. The role allowed Marion to shine in another dual performance, first as a fashionable New York flapper, and then as a convincingly androgynous Oscar, complete with short hair and sharply tailored military uniforms. Her bold, modern appearance in the film would still turn heads in today's fashion-forward world. The Red Mill made a big splash on Broadway, so adapting it for the silver screen seemed like a no-brainer for Marion Davies. In the 1927 film version, Marion played a Dutch girl working at the titular inn. The production spared no expense, creating an elaborate Dutch village complete with a canal, a windmill, and a detailed inn. While critics praised the ice skating scenes, they were less kind to the slapstick humor. Marion endured a series of over-the-top antics, including falling through ice, tumbling into a well, wrestling with an ironing board for what felt like an eternity, and even getting spanked by the innkeeper. The grand finale. She ends up trapped inside the old mill. Without its original musical score, the movie leaned heavily on its plot, which wasn't exactly riveting. Still, audiences adored Marion, and her charm carried the film. After The Red Mill, her first release of 1927, Marion went on to make 6 more films before the arrival of sound cinema, which marked her transition into talkies. Among her silent comedies, 5 films stood out: Tilly the Toiler, The Fair Coed, Quality Street, The Patsy, and Show People. The latter 2 are widely considered her best work. Marion had found her niche, blending humor with authenticity. In fact, many believed she came closest to portraying her true self on screen. Her comedic brilliance shone brightest in Show People, often regarded as her masterpiece. Directed by King Vidor and co-starring William Haynes, the film was a sharp satire of Hollywood's star-making machine. It was also her final silent film. Shot on the MGM studio lot in Los Angeles, it featured cameos from Hollywood icons like Charlie Chaplin, John Gilbert, Douglas Fairbanks, and even Marion herself. One standout moment saw Marion's real-life self crossing paths with her character Peggy Pepper on the studio lot. Audiences also loved her hilarious parody of Gloria Swanson, which even Swanson's fans found charming. In July 1928, Marion and William Randolph Hearst embarked on a European tour with a dozen of her closest girlfriends. When they returned in October, Hollywood had fully embraced sound films. This shift worried Marion because of her lifelong stutter. After watching Al Jolson's second talkie, The Singing Fool, she was so moved by his performance of Sonny Boy that she broke down, convinced her career was over. But those fears were unfounded. Marion's voice, a low and humorous tone, turned out to be a pleasant surprise. Unlike some silent stars who struggled with accents, shrill voices, or a lack of musical talent, Marion adapted with ease. Her sound test confirmed that her stutter could be managed, and she successfully transitioned into talkies. Her first sound film, The Hollywood Review of 1929, showcased her Broadway roots as a singer and dancer. In one memorable scene, she performed alongside a chorus of male dancers dressed as grenadier guards. Initially dwarfed by the towering soldiers, she soon stole the spotlight, dancing on a giant drum and singing with confidence. Over the course of her career, she made 15 sound films, though most are not held in high regard today. A few exceptions stand out, including the delightful musical Going Hollywood with Bing Crosby, the screwball comedy Cain and Mabel with Clark Gable, and Hearts Divided, a quirky tale about Napoleon's brother in America. While these later films may not have cemented her legacy, they proved that Marion Davies could thrive in any era of Hollywood. Hearst and Marion Davies took a trip to Europe for some downtime, and during their visit to Versailles, Hearst found inspiration in Stefan Zweig's biography of Marie Antoinette. He thought it would make the perfect film for Marion. However, MGM owned the rights to the book, and while Louis B. Mayer was open to selling them, he insisted Hearst cover the entire production cost. Complications arose when Norma Shearer, the wife of MGM executive Irving Thalberg, expressed interest in the role as well. Tensions between Mayer and Hearst escalated, leading Hearst to sever ties with MGM and Shearer. Reflecting on the incident, Marion later said that the Marie Antoinette project was the breaking point for her relationship with MGM. She recalled how Hearst, angrier than she was, declared they'd never work with the studio again. Mayer, she noted, wasn't too upset about losing her, but did regret losing Hearst, whom he described as the queen in their chess game of power. Not long after, Marion's famous bungalow was carefully dismantled and moved to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. This transition happened quickly, sealed by a brief 5-minute conversation between Hearst and Jack Warner. Marion went on to enjoy a respectable career in the sound film era, outlasting many silent-era stars like Mary Pickford and Clara Bow. Her final film, Ever Since Eve, showcased her once again in a dual role, playing a secretary who disguises herself to fend off unwanted advances. It was a fitting end to her career, though her departure from Hollywood came sooner than expected. Around the same time, the Hearst empire also began to crumble. By 1937, William Randolph Hearst's seemingly unshakable empire was collapsing under the weight of the Great Depression. Facing massive financial troubles, Hearst was forced to sell much of the contents of St. Donat's Castle. Marion, ever loyal, sold her jewelry and investments, and even wrote a $1 million check to help him avoid bankruptcy. Hearst's debts were staggering, totaling $126 million, equivalent to over $2.6 billion today. When Hearst's Cosmopolitan Pictures shut down in 1938, Marion left the film industry and returned to San Simeon. In her autobiography, she admitted she had grown tired of acting and chose instead to focus on being Hearst's companion. During the late 1930s and 1940s, her drinking worsened, and she and Hearst became increasingly reclusive. Their once glamorous lifestyle began to fade, resembling a modern Gothic ruin. They spent much of World War II at Hearst's Wintoun estate before returning to San Simeon in 1945. Although Marion made occasional radio appearances, She lamented the restrictions of her acting career. She once noted that even though she only worked on 2 films a year, she couldn't fully enjoy her time off. Travel was limited, and she had to avoid things like sunburn or overeating to maintain her image. Despite these challenges, it seems she and Hearst found some joy in her retirement, even as financial troubles and her drinking persisted. Marion's films, while popular, were rarely celebrated for their artistic merit. However, she was known for her generosity, often anonymously paying for the medical expenses of her colleagues. But her legacy was about to take an unexpected turn, one she could neither predict nor control. On May 8, 1941, Citizen Kane premiered, forever altering how the world viewed Hearst, and by extension, Marion. The pair likely watched the film together in a San Francisco theater. Hearst biographer John Tebble speculated that Hearst might have found the portrayal of himself, played by the dashing Orson Welles, as a cunning rogue somewhat flattering. After all, Hearst had endured far harsher criticism over the years. However, the character of Susan Alexander, widely interpreted as a depiction of Marion, enraged him. Hearst was deeply offended by the suggestion that this fictional character represented the woman he loved, and it was clear the public would draw that conclusion. The release of Citizen Kane marked a turning point, casting a long shadow over both their legacies. Marion Davies was often unfairly overshadowed by the character of Susan Alexander in Citizen Kane, a portrayal that painted her as a talentless singer propped up by the wealth and influence of her lover, Charles Foster Kane. While Marion reportedly found the film upsetting, she chose to follow advice once given to her by William Randolph Hearst. Reflecting on his words, she mentioned that he had told her to ignore insults and make as little fuss as possible about them. Taking this to heart, she dismissed Citizen Kane, adding with a touch of humor that the film never made much money anyway. It was a sharp and understated critique, perfectly capturing her wit. Though Citizen Kane didn't achieve box office success at the time, Marion couldn't have predicted the seismic impact it would have on cinema history. To her, it seemed absurd that a relatively obscure RKO film by a first-time director could overshadow her 2 decades of stardom. She underestimated the film's staying power and the way it would reshape public perception, not just of her, but of the silent film era as a whole. By the 1950s, Marion's reputation had been unfairly reduced to that of Susan Alexander's supposed inspiration, a gross misrepresentation that ignored her genuine talent and success. Even her obituaries painted her as a mediocre actress, despite the fact that most of her films were box office hits. Movies like When Knighthood Was in Flower and Little Old New York were among the highest-grossing films of their time, proving her star power. Unfortunately, the shadow of Citizen Kane lingered, perpetuating the myth that she was little more than a talentless opportunist. Later in life, Orson Welles himself sought to set the record straight. In the foreword to Marion's posthumous autobiography, The Times We Had, he made it clear that Susan Alexander and Marion Davies were nothing alike. He explained that while Susan was portrayed as Kane's unhappy, imprisoned wife, Marion was Hearst's cherished partner, a woman he adored for over 30 years. Welles described their relationship as a true love story, emphasizing that Hearst was always devoted to her, treating her not as a possession but as the treasure of his heart. He also pointed out that Hearst's lavish estates, including the legendary San Simeon, were places of joy and celebration. Marion reigned there as a gracious hostess, not a tragic figure trapped in isolation like Susan Alexander. Welles further clarified to filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich that Susan Alexander's character wasn't based on Marion at all. Instead, the inspiration came from real-life figures like Samuel Insull, who built the Chicago Opera House, and Harold Fowler McCormick, who famously promoted his wife, Ganna Walska's opera career. Decades after Marion's death, a re-evaluation of her work began to emerge, helped by the increased availability of her films. As audiences revisited her performances, particularly her comedic roles, they discovered a sharp, natural talent that had been overlooked for far too long. In hindsight, The association with Susan Alexander was a profound injustice to Marion Davies. She was a legitimate star, a box office draw, and a gifted actress whose legacy deserved far more respect than it initially received. On April 29, 1951, William Randolph Hearst turned 88, but his declining health kept him confined to his room. Marion Davies, ever devoted, arranged a small celebration upstairs with 5 of her closest friends. Her gift to him was deeply personal, a painting of his mother, Phoebe Hearst, holding him as a baby. The gesture brought Hearst to tears, and Marion, kneeling by his side, comforted him, urging him that everything would be all right. Just a few months later, on August 14, 1951, Hearst passed away. Marion, exhausted from caring for him, was asleep at the time. By the time she woke up, his body had already been taken away by his sons, who brought him to rest with his estranged wife. This left Marion heartbroken. She later expressed her devastation, saying she felt robbed of the chance to say goodbye to the man she had loved for 32 years. She described it as if they had taken something that belonged to her, leaving her utterly alone. Just 10 weeks after Hearst's death, Marion married for the first time, tying the knot with Captain Horace Brown of the California State Guard, who bore a resemblance to a younger Hearst. However, her life came to a close on September 23, 1961, when she succumbed to cancer. Marion was laid to rest in the Doris family crypt in Hollywood. After her death, her extensive jewelry collection was cataloged, including standout pieces like a 29-carat diamond pendant, a platinum diamond watch, and even a gold toothpick. She also left behind tape recordings for a memoir, brimming with stories about her life and her love for Hearst. She recalled his playful side, mentioning how he'd sometimes break into a tap dance just for fun. Marion described him as kind, innocent, and utterly incapable of harming anyone. She remembered him confessing his love for her, to which she would simply reply, "Let it ride. It's all right with me." And so, she did. She let it ride for a lifetime. Marion Davies remains a singular figure in Hollywood history. While today's film stars may sometimes have their careers shaped by powerful romantic partners, Marion stands as the most iconic example of this dynamic in Hollywood's golden age. To the public, and even in her own eyes, she was known first as Hearst's mistress, and second as an actress. Hearst, a man shaped by Victorian ideals, believed that a wealthy man should support his mistress financially, ensuring her comfort, even as time passed. While others in his position might have helped their lovers move on by setting up businesses or other ventures, Hearst never replaced Marion. Instead, he gave her something extraordinary. He made her a movie star, and she embraced that role with enthusiasm. Over the years, her legacy has been unfairly tarnished. Critics have dismissed her as a gold digger or a talentless actress, but these claims couldn't be further from the truth. Marion entered the film industry on her own initiative, overcoming a stutter to become one of the rare stars who successfully transitioned from silent films to talkies. Her name lit up marquees, and her popularity with moviegoers proved that she was far more than just a product of Hearst's wealth. Audiences adored her, flocking to see her films, even if critics turned up their noses. Marion Davies was a true star, beloved by the people who mattered most, her fans. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.